Hello and what is up YouTube? My name is G3Iron and welcome to our 11th episode of Featured Build of the Week discussion. This week we are featuring iRa38's COC Assassin with bows. I know the first thing that you're going to think of as soon as you hear COC is you're going to think, oh, you're using double Cosprees, right? And you're scaling up your spell damage through the use of your Cosprees and casting all sorts of wonderful, delightful, damaging spells through that triggering mechanism. But no! Remember, this is 3.9 Metamorph, the Bow League, and so we are in fact playing a bow build. So we're featuring this particular build today with the permission of iRa38. He's got a wonderful, wonderful put together guide that you can follow on the forums. We're at a stage at this point in the Metamorph League, if you've got a bunch of extra currency laying around, or if you're a standard player and you've got a bunch of currency laying around, then this is going to be the build for you. Those of you who are veterans of the channel, you know the way how things work around here. You can like, subscribe, and ding the bell to be notified about more video discussions just like this one. And of course, at this point in time, there are some timestamps above my entirely bald and shiny forehead for your convenience if you ever want to jump ahead or jump back and revisit any of our discussion points today. So first off, iRa gives credit where credit is due, and he says, I'd like to mention that I created this build, in quotation marks, when I first saw Mage Fist's video, and then I just added my own spin on it with more currency to make it even better than it already was. So first off, pros and cons. Why should you play this build? I've been personally excited for the last 3 weeks to show off this build, because first I spent a week like just perusing and stalking the build essentially, and then I spent a week actually studying the build and seeing it in action. And now I'm recommending it to you. The pros on this particular list are short, but they are quite effective as pros. I have never seen better written, shorter summary pros than what iRa does right here. He's concise. So first off, it's fast mapping. A lot of builds will claim to be fast at mapping, and then they're not fast at mapping. This build is fast at mapping. It's also very, very fast and easy for bosses. You actually saw a bit of the highlight there on iRa's own YouTube channel regarding how quickly you can clear endgame bosses, whether or not that's leading up to the Elder, whether or not that's leading up to Uber Elder, whether or not that's taking on Elder himself or taking on Shaper, taking on high tier metamorphs. You can do it all with this particular build, and that's because it's got good damage. And another pro is, if you really need to, you can play this on a budget. I would actually just give a bit of a warning here. Yes, you can play this on a bit of a budget, but this is the sort of build that you want to just throw tons of currency at. So if you've got a bunch of currency laying around, this is going to be a build for you. On to the cons. iRa says, well, first off, high-end optimization requires currency investment. Yeah, no kidding. And you can't do reflect maps for LE reflect or no regen maps. Well, because we do so much damage, it's kind of a given that you can't do LE reflect maps. So don't play this as a league starter. If I see any of you saying, oh, Iron, I'm going to try this out as a league starter, I'm going to at you down in the comments. I'm sure some of you will do it, but just don't. Save yourself the headache. You don't have the currency at the league start to do this as a league starter. Anyway, let's move on to the next bit of discussion that we're going to take a look at, which is the gear. This entire build revolves around having a bow that's got COC on it, which you can see right here on his thicket bow. This is called the Viper Horn Thicket Bow. It's got supported on it. Socketed gems are supported by level 20 cast on critical strike. This means as a 6-link bow, this is essentially a pseudo 7-link, and you can simply drop your Volatile Dead along with your barrage inside this particular bow, and it's going to be great. Socketed gems are going to actually go off. Your Volatile Dead is going to go off by you hitting and attacking things with your barrage, which is going to have massive, massive amounts of attack speed. Now at this point you might be wondering, if you're anything like me and you've maybe played Poet's Pen builds or you've played Volatile Dead before, you're going, okay, that's fine for one half of the equation to set up your Volatile Dead and get your Volatile Dead going. Cast on crit makes sense, but you need corpses in order to actually explode your Volatile Dead. Volatile Dead requires that you have a corpse in order to summon the homing balls of death that actually come with Volatile Dead. So how is it that you're going to proc that? Well, quite ingeniously, iRa says, use the Ascendancy Chant Helm. This particular unique helm has on it the particular line that says, trigger a socketed spell when you attack with a bow. meaning that we can actually stack a corpse generation spell inside our Asenaths, and that will then proc every time we are actually using our attack with our bow, which in this case would be Barrage. So you Barrage, which then summons corpses, which then explode with Volatile Dead, which then home out and blow up the entire screen. Savvy? Got it? It's a great, great setup. Let's take a look at his passive tree and then continue our discussion from there. So iRa's passive tree is pretty widespread out, you can see, and there's good reason for it, of course. Down here on the bottom right, you're going to grab Acrobatics and Phase Acrobatics. These are both required if you're going to be playing an evasion dodge-based build. That's going to be our primary layer of defenses on this particular build. I typically, when I am leveling up a character that requires or uses Acrobatics and Phase Acrobatics, I typically go over and path towards that first, so that way I've got my defensive layering set, even as I'm leveling the character and progressing through the 10-act story. At that point, you're going to pass up all the way through, coming up and grabbing Infused along all the way through and grabbing Written in Blood, and then coming through the Witch Tree, grabbing some crit with Throat Seeker, as well as grabbing some additional elemental damage with Snowforged. You're going to make your way all the way up to Heart of the Flame. This is essential. This is your biggest single wheel of damage that you've got on the entirety of the tree. So depending on whether or not you want to play this with more defensive orientation or offensive orientation, you can either make your way up to Heart of the Flame first and then go after Acro and Phase Acro, or you can do as I would do, which is go grab Phase Acro and Acro and then make your way up towards all the damage like Heart of the Flame. Next to Heart of the Flame comes Disciple of the Forbidden. This particular node gives you an additional maximum power charge, and it gives us 5% chance to gain a power charge on kill, and it gives us 5% increased damage per power charge, which we love power charges on this particular build. We are going to stack them up a little bit, not going crazy with the power charges, but a little bit. We're going to stack them up in order to give us some considerable amounts of damage. We're going to make our way over and grab Arcane Potency for some more critical strike and critical multi. Then we'll come over, grab Overcharge for another power charge, and then we'll round things out by grabbing Divine Judgment, and then coming all the way in and grabbing Discipline and Training for some more additional life. You'll notice this particular build doesn't have massive amounts of life on it. It's only got 147% increased life from the tree, giving us a total of 5,600 life, and that's while using a Combs. So this isn't necessarily the tankiest of builds, but hopefully as soon as you saw the thumbnail down below that we were playing a COC bow build for an assassin, you weren't expecting to come in with Righteous Fire levels of health pools at this point in time. Taking a look at Ascendancies, we've got Mistwalker, which of course is very helpful for defensive purposes. You've got 50% chance to gain Elusive on a critical strike. Because we are critting all over the place all the time, you're pretty much always going to have Elusive up, which is quite a nice layer for defensive purposes. Then of course you also take no extra damage from critical strikes while Elusive. This is a big deal. A lot of the time, the reason why players die, especially in 3.9 when we're fighting Metamorphs, isn't just because they've got a massive base amount of damage that's hitting us with a massive move, but a lot of the time because various minions, various monsters, various bosses in Path of Exile right now are critting for a ton of damage. If you are looking at a build that can actually mitigate critical damage, you'll actually see that a lot of times maybe what would have killed you because it would have crit you and one-shot you now actually won't. So I would highly recommend that you take Mistwalker first if you're looking for a defensive bolstering in your Ascendancy. If, however, you'd rather just go for damage, you can go for Unstable Fusion. And then during your second lab run, you can grab Deadly Infusion, which gives you +8 to crit strike multi per power charge, which, yes, remember, we are stacking just a few power charges. And then we're also going to have +2 to critical strike chance while at maximum power charges, with a 10% increased move speed while at maximum power charges. You're pretty much always going to be at max power charges, by the way, so just consider this as something of an ongoing and available buff to you that's going to be pretty consistent throughout your entire gameplay experience, because we're getting so many power charges as we are killing monsters. Basically, the only time you're not going to have full power charges is when you enter an instance, when you enter a map, when you enter a zone for the first time. That's pretty much the only time that you're not going to be at maximum power charges. You then can round out or choose to come over and grab Opportunist if you'd rather. Opportunistic gives you 20% increased movement speed if you've killed recently, which recently in Path of Exile means the last 4 seconds. So the answer is yes, you're going to have that 20% move speed. And then damage from your critical strikes cannot be reflected, which is just a nice little bonus. 20% more damage while there is at most 1 rare or unique enemy nearby, and 10% reduced damage taken while there are at least 2 rare or unique enemies nearby. This is quite nice because you can pick this up towards the end of your build, or again, if you really, really need another defensive option as you are going through and killing off act bosses. You shouldn't need this as you are progressing through the 10-act story. You should be fine on your defensive bonuses, but this is something that does apply whenever you're going into, let's say, an instance where you're killing Kitava, and Kitava is the only one in the room, or when you're entering a room and Diodre is the only one in the room, or Piety, etc. It also takes place whenever you are killing endgame bosses, right? When you go into the Shaper's realm, and Shaper's the only one in the room. That's quite nice, because you deal 20% more damage while there is at most one rare or unique enemy nearby. So it's just a flat 20% more multiplier that you get off of your Ascendancy, which is quite nice. Coming over and looking at our skill gems and the way that you want to scale these skill gems in particular, you're going to want to socket Volatile Dead, Inspiration, Conk Effect, Awakened Elemental Focus, if you can afford it, again, which at this point, if you're still watching, I assume you have currency to throw at this build, or you're at least interested in acquiring currency to throw at this build, and Empower at level 4, and then Barrage. Obviously, if you can scale up things even more, then one option that you could do is to scale up and just throw even more Awakened Gems at this particular build. If you really, really want to, you can go for a Volatile Dead 21-23. But honestly, the amount of damage that this thing does and the synergy that it's got in between Wave of Conviction, along with Volatile Dead, along with the barrage attacks that you are using to proc all of this stuff, you're going to be fine for damage even if you don't have a corrupted Volatile Dead level 21. It's fine if you're just level 20. The damage is going to feel great. Moving on into our helmet socket. This is very, very important because remember, this is our Ascendancy helmet. This is key. This helmet is going to trigger these spells when we attack with Barrage. So we're going to generate corpses through using Desecrate, and that is going to be supported by Spell Cascade, which means there's going to be a whole bunch of extra corpses for our Volatile Dead to pull from, which means a whole bunch of extra Volatile Dead balls that are floating around, killing whatever it is that they can home in on and take out. Next up, you've also got Flammability, which is quite nice. It means that Flammability is going to go off in relatively strong areas around your character and close to your character. It's not going to be an off-screen cursing ability, so if you're playing with an extra wide monitor or you're doing anything where you're stretching your screen, don't expect Flammability to reach out to monsters that are way on the far edge of the screen. But it's quite nice when you're in a boss encounter and you're pretty much in a tight zone anyway, because it always means that the boss is going to be cursed with Flammability. On top of that, you're going to have Wave of Conviction, just to make sure that whatever it is that is still alive, it's not dead yet, that you're attacking, is getting hit with exposure, which is going to reduce its elemental resistances even further, making it more susceptible to your Volatile Dead homing balls of flaming death. Well, we've already mentioned the particular type of bow that you are looking to go for. It is a bow that is supported by level 20 cast on crit. But in terms of the quiver slot, something that you want to do is you want to use Maloney's Mechanism, the Ornate Quiver. This is a particular unique quiver that is very, very nice for a build like this because it also has the particular line, like your Ascendancy's helmet, that says trigger a socketed bow skill when you attack with a bow. This is very, very helpful as a quality of life thing for your build. It's not necessarily needed for the build in order to take off, but it's quite helpful. And then you've also got some attack speed and some life on there. On top of that, for defensive purposes, I've already mentioned you're going to go for a Combs Heart. One of the things that's nice about going for a Combs when you're playing Volatile Dead is Combs has flat life on it, right? That's why you use Combs. But it also has increased fire damage, which is just like this nice little perk over here on the side. It's kind of like if you go for a walk and you happen to find a 25-cent piece along the way. It's like, oh, this was a nice walk outside, and I just found a quarter. Nice. It's not something to build around, it's not something to adjust your life around, but it's a nice little bonus that you get. On top of that, you're going to be using a Zoph's Blood, which of course covers enemies in ash when they hit you, and it gives you Avatar of Fire. This is a big, big deal because it means that your damage that you're dealing is fire damage, and of course, enemies who are covered in ash get a massive, massive debuff. It's quite nice, and so I highly, highly recommend this. This is, again, not a cheap unique early on in a league, so you are definitely going to want to save up currency and purchase Zoph's Blood as you are able, and as your currency in League allows you to do so. Next up, we're going to dual wield Circles of Anguish. Both of these are going to have increased fire damage while affected by Herald of Ash, and then Herald of Ash has increased buff effect. So in other words, everything that you're hitting that is going to be exploding due to Herald of Ash and doing bunches of damage, tons of damage all around it because of the Herald of Ash effect. Basically, all of that damage gets amplified by one of these rings, let alone by using two of these rings. So your Herald of Ash effect does actually get buffed by using double rings in this spot. One thing that this means is this means on your boots, you are going to want to have boots that have got a lot of resistances on them. And lastly, the big thing that I've been telling everyone, whether or not we've been streaming or making videos this entire league, if you can, if you've got the currency, which, by the way, if you're playing a bow build during this bow league, you should have the currency. You need to be getting yourself boots that have got tailwind on them. We are playing a COC build, which means we're going to be critting all the time. Our effective crit chance is 100% on this build. We are always going to be critting, meaning you're always going to have tailwind, which is 10% increased action speed. It means your attack speed, your move speed, and your cast speed all go up by 10%. It is a massive boost to quality of life and a massive boost to your DPS. Rounding out the flasks, the unique flasks that you want to look for here are Cinder Swallow, which of course you can get self-farming if you take on Katarina, and eventually she'll drop that for you, or you can purchase it if you're in Trade League, and Bottled Faith, which is, of course, a massive investment again, but it's also a massive amount of damage for the entirety of the build as you are going into boss encounters. So that is something to keep an eye on if you're able to afford it. Lastly, we're going to want to prioritize a Watcher's Eye that gives us Crit Strike multi while affected by anger. We're obviously trying to stack as much Crit Strike multi because we're always critting, and because we're always critting, that's a bunch of extra damage that we're doing. And so if we can scale up that Crit Strike multi even more while we're affected by anger as one of our reservations, then of course, who wouldn't want to take that? Well, thanks so much for watching today. If, of course, you've got any questions down below, I would highly recommend that you drop us a comment down below, or you can head on over. iRa is incredibly responsive. He's responsive to PMs. He's responsive on this particular forum thread. As always, down below in the video description is a link to iRa38's forum guide, as well as to the video that we used showing off a bit of the gameplay, as well as the path of building that iRa has made available for us all to copy and enjoy as we fly around during this bow league in 3.9. I hope today is the day Mirror of Calandra drops for you as you are playing COC with the Volatile Dead Assassin. Thanks for watching that video. If you'd like more information on any of our discussion points today, you can see them down below in the video description. If you'd also like to join our Discord or support our Patreon, you can do so with the links down below. Thanks again, and big shout out to all of our Patreon supporters.